Serial killer Derek Todd Lee killed 7 women over a 10-year span, but he was almost never caught due to police believing the suspect was white. He was rumored to have used a recording of a crying baby to lure his victims out of their homes. In 2007, a British woman named Amy Dallamura was banned from being within 50 meters of the sea. This is because she unsuccessfully tried to commit suicide by jumping into the water more than 50 times, costing police, Coast Guards, and the Royal Air Force at least $1 million combined. In 2010, a woman from Quebec parked her car in the middle of the highway so that she could help a family of ducklings cross. But this caused a motorcyclist to slam into her car, killing he and his teenage daughter instantly. The animal lover was found guilty of criminal negligence and sentenced to 90 days in jail. Manute Bol, one of the tallest players in NBA history at 7'7", lived through extreme hardship long before playing basketball. He reportedly witnessed villages in Sudan being attacked during the Second Sudanese Civil War and claimed he once killed a lion with a spear as a teenager. After making it to the NBA, Bol earned millions, but gave away most of his money to support refugees and humanitarian efforts in Sudan, often leaving himself nearly broke. In 2010, he suddenly became ill after returning from Africa. Doctors diagnosed him with acute kidney failure and Stevens-Johnson syndrome, a rare and life-threatening condition that causes the skin to blister and peel away. He died at just 47 years old, with much of his body covered in painful lesions from the disease. In the United States, lumber baron Wellington R. Burt died in 1919 with an estate worth around $100 million, but none of it went to his children or grandchildren. His will included a spite clause ordering the fortune be withheld until 21 years after the death of his last surviving grandchild who was alive at the time of his death. Because of that condition, all of his children and every one of those grandchildren died before the money was ever released. The estate wasn't settled until 2011, nearly a century later, leaving the fortune to distant descendants who had never even known him. This is why you should never dump your pet goldfish in the wild. A goldfish weighing 30 kilograms, about 67 pounds, was pulled from a lake in France after growing to an enormous size. Goldfish can reproduce rapidly, creating entire populations of invasive fish that overwhelm local ecosystems. Some lakes have reported thousands of them multiplying beneath the surface, unseen until the damage is already done. Without natural predators and with endless food, they grow to ridiculous sizes, churn up lake beds, rip out vegetation, cloud the water, and slowly suffocate native wildlife. In 2002, Washington State mother Lydia Fairchild nearly lost custody of her own children after DNA tests appeared to prove she wasn't biologically related to them. She had applied for public assistance, and routine genetic testing showed her DNA did not match the children she had given birth to, raising suspicions of fraud. After multiple failed maternity tests, doctors discovered she was an extremely rare human chimera, meaning she had absorbed her twin in the womb and carried 2 distinct sets of DNA in her body. Her reproductive organs contained different genetic material than the rest of her tissues, which is why standard DNA testing falsely suggested she wasn't their mother. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, the US government issued Mickey Mouse gas masks in case of a chemical attack. The incentive was to make them appear less scary to kids, but most people don't think it worked. An atomic bomb cameraman accidentally ripped off his safety goggles a few seconds before the bomb exploded. He immediately covered his eyes with his hands, and when the bomb detonated, he saw the bones of his hands through his closed eyelids just like an X-ray. When the Soviet Union was pushing towards Berlin during World War II, a Nazi SS soldier was forced to play piano for his captors. They made it clear to him in sign language that he would be executed the moment he stopped playing. He played for 22 straight hours, after which he collapsed in tears. They congratulated him, then shot him. Bullets fired into the air usually fall back down at terminal velocity. As a result, there have been thousands of deaths due to celebratory gunfire. For example, in 2003, more than 20 people were killed by celebratory gunfire in Iraq following the deaths of Saddam Hussein's 2 sons. Chemical castration is mandatory in Florida and California for pedophiles convicted of their second offense. During a 2019 expedition to the deepest point in the ocean, explorers found a plastic bag and candy wrappers, indicating that plastic pollution hasn't spared even the most remote corners of the ocean. A man from South Africa adopted a hippo after it was rescued from a river. 5 years later, the hippo dragged him into the same river and mauled him to death. Armed with giant canine teeth, hippos kill more people each year than lions, elephants, leopards, buffalo, and rhinos combined. They can run at speeds up to 30 miles per hour despite weighing up to 4,000 pounds. So yeah, don't get a pet hippo. Point Nemo is officially known as the oceanic pole of inaccessibility, aka the point in the ocean that is farthest away from land. It is surrounded by more than 1,000 miles of ocean in every direction. At any given time, the closest humans to this point are most likely to be astronauts. In 1999, Jay-Z stabbed a man in the stomach with a 5-inch blade after rumors that the man was behind the bootlegging of one of his albums. He later pleaded guilty to third-degree assault and accepted a sentence of 3 years probation. Hans Schmidt was the only Catholic priest to ever be executed in the U.S. Once his mistress became pregnant, he slit her throat, drank her blood, and dismembered her body. He was found guilty of the heinous crime and executed via electric chair in 1916. In the year 2000, an art exhibit in Denmark featured 10 functioning blenders containing live goldfish. Visitors were given the option of pressing the on button to instantly kill one fish for absolutely no reason. At least one person pressed the button since 2 fish were dead by the end of the exhibition. The museum director was charged with and later acquitted of animal cruelty. Steven Stucker, best known for playing the chaotic air controller in Airplane, died in 1986 at just 38 years old due to complications with AIDS. At the time, the disease was still poorly understood, widely feared, and heavily stigmatized, especially within the entertainment industry. He publicly revealed his diagnosis in 1985, making him one of the first recognizable entertainers to speak openly about having AIDS during a period when many kept it hidden out of fear of backlash and discrimination. Like many early AIDS patients, his condition quickly deteriorated before any effective treatments existed. His death came at a time when thousands were dying under similar circumstances, helping to bring more visibility to a crisis that had long been ignored. In 1978, in Birmingham, England, medical photographer Janet Parker became the last person to die from smallpox after being exposed at the University of Birmingham Medical School, likely through airborne transmission from a laboratory working with the virus just 1 floor below her office. She developed symptoms days later and died on September 11th after several weeks in isolation. The outbreak triggered a massive public health response, including quarantines and emergency vaccines, but no further cases spread beyond Janet. During the crisis, her father suffered a fatal heart attack while visiting her in the hospital. The laboratory's head, Professor Henry Bedson, later died by suicide amid intense scrutiny over the incident. Shortly after going missing for 6 days, Edgar Allan Poe died a mysterious death. When he was found, he was wearing another man's cheap clothing and couldn't explain where he'd been. Acting delirious and distressed, he was brought to the hospital where he died of unknown causes at the age of 40. Bella and Edward's relationship throughout the Twilight series meets all 15 official criteria for an abusive relationship. Up until the 1800s, Turkish women who were accused of cheating on their husbands were tied up in a sack filled with cats, then thrown in the ocean. In 2002, a 15-year-old boy became inspired by the terrorist attacks on 9/11. He decided to steal an airplane and fly it into a building in Tampa, Florida. It ended up damaging only one office room, and he was the only person that died. When he was a young boy, actor Terrence Howard witnessed his dad stab a man to death while they were waiting in line to take pictures with Santa Claus at a department store in what became known as the Santa line slaying. The victim, who was also with his family, reportedly made a racist comment to Terrence's father Tyrone after he thought he cut the line, which quickly escalated to a fatal fight. Tyrone was arrested and pleaded self-defense since the other man attacked first and was sentenced to 11 months in prison. After a deadly Peruvian avalanche in 1962, 2 American climbers traveled down to investigate and later warned Peruvian authorities that there is a threat of a much larger avalanche just waiting to happen. These warnings were not only ignored but actively suppressed by the Peruvian government, as the climbers were accused of fear-mongering and anyone who even mentioned their research was arrested. 8 years later, the deadliest avalanche in history occurred there, completely destroying the town of Yungay while killing over 30,000 people. Jeremy Renner's snowplow accident in January 2023 proved to be even more graphic than initially reported. While attempting to assist a stranded vehicle near his home, he was suddenly pulled under his 14,000-pound snowplow, which crushed his body with so much force that he later recalled hearing the crunching of his own bones. Renner sustained 38 broken bones, a collapsed lung, severe cranial trauma, and required extensive reconstruction with metal plates in his chest, legs, and face. A Among the most horrifying details he later revealed was that the impact had dislodged his left eyeball so severely that he could see it sticking out with his right eye. Despite the injuries, Renner remained conscious throughout the ordeal, fully aware of his condition, and at one point attempted to write what he believed would be his final words to his family. The actor has since regained much of his physical function, thanks largely to his daughter's support and his own relentless determination to continue living. After 9/11, the rescue dogs searching in the rubble started to become depressed because they weren't finding any live bodies. Rescue workers started to bury themselves in the debris to trick the dogs into thinking they were saving people. It is estimated that just over 100 billion people have died on the planet to date. In 1971, high school student Juliana Kopka was sucked out of an airplane after it was struck by lightning. She fell nearly 10,000 feet still strapped to her chair and lived, only to endure an 11-day walk through the Amazon rainforest to the nearest civilization. She was eventually rescued by some local lumbermen and ended up being the sole survivor of the plane crash. At the height of her Disney fame, Ashley Tisdale was battling serious health and mental struggles. Since childhood, she had suffered from severe anxiety and panic attacks, and during her High School Musical years, they became so intense that she was repeatedly rushed to hospitals believing she was having heart attacks until doctors realized it was panic. The stress left her barely eating and constantly exhausted. In 2007, at 21 years old, months of unexplained pain led doctors to discover a tumor in her breast that required surgery, later confirmed to be benign. Years later, she revealed she developed alopecia, causing patches of her hair to fall out from stress and autoimmune issues, saying the pressure to appear fine through the years came at a real cost to her health. In January of 2026 in Pennsylvania, 11-year-old Clayton Dietz fatally shot his adoptive father, Douglas Dietz, on the night of the boy's own birthday after his Nintendo Switch was taken away from him. Police say the child waited until his father fell asleep on the couch, found the key to his gun safe, loaded a handgun, and shot him once in the head. The boy later admitted he did it out of anger over losing his game console. Douglas Dietz died at the scene, while prosecutors charged the boy with criminal homicide and moved to try him as an adult, calling the case one of the most disturbing juvenile killings in recent years. Dolphins love interacting with pregnant women because they communicate using ultrasound. Not only can they hear the mother's heartbeat, but also the baby's, and they find this very fascinating. For more than 20 years, a dolphin named Polaris Jack regularly guided ships through treacherous waters until his disappearance in 1912. A man from Argentina posted this photo of a giant mosquito called a galley-nipper that his mother killed in her home. While its bite can be very painful, it's not nearly as dangerous as the smaller mosquito, which can transmit yellow fever and Zika virus. Naka Cave in Thailand closely resembles a giant petrified snake. The average silverback gorilla is 4 to 9 times stronger than the average human male. They can deadlift 1,800 pounds and their grip can crush the skull of a crocodile. In 1976, Princeton undergraduate John Aristotle Phillips wrote his thesis on how to build an atomic bomb. He ended up getting an A on the paper, but never got it back because it was seized by the FBI. During World War II, the London Zoo had to kill all of its venomous animals in case the zoo was bombed and the animals escaped. During that same war, Juliana the Great Dane was awarded the Blue Cross Medal after putting out a bomb by peeing on it. In 2008, a British Marine named Matthew Croucher flung himself back first onto a grenade to save his comrades. Though the explosion threw him into the air, the blast was absorbed by his rucksack. He was prepared to die but managed to walk away with nothing but a nosebleed and a headache. While filming Night at the Museum 3, Robin Williams struggled with panic attacks and often had trouble remembering even one line. His autopsy later revealed that he'd been suffering from a severe form of dementia and lost more than 40% of the dopamine neurons in his brain. Twice convicted murderer Thomas Grasso was executed by lethal injection in 1995. His last words were, "Please tell the media I did not get my SpaghettiOs, I got spaghetti. I want the press to know this." After being arrested for joyriding in a stolen police car, Shane Goldsby got his sister's rapist as a cellmate in 2020. But despite repeatedly asking for a transfer, no action was taken. After the man taunted him for days with specific details about the assault, Goldsby snapped and stomped the man to death. Goldsby later pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and had 25 years added to his sentence. That was the moment a grieving father threw a chair at a judge inside a Dutch courtroom after hearing the sentence for the man responsible for killing his family members. In 2013, a speeding driver lost control of his car in Mayol, Netherlands, striking and killing a 2-year-old girl and her grandparents as they rode bicycles. The driver was initially sentenced to just 120 hours of community service and a 1-year suspended license, a ruling that sparked outrage in the courtroom. Prosecutors later appealed, and the sentence was increased to 15 months in prison and a 4-year driving ban. Elderly Englishman Stan Beaton kept a voicemail greeting recorded years earlier that included the voice of his wife Ruby, who died of cancer in 2003. For more than a decade, he would play the message almost every day just to hear her voice again. When a telecommunications system upgrade accidentally deleted the recording, engineers at the phone company spent several days searching archive servers until they were finally able to recover it. When the message was played for him again during a BBC interview, Beaton broke down in tears after hearing his wife's voice for the first time since it was lost. This is why you should always make sure you're in the right Uber. In 2019, 21-year-old Samantha Josephson hopped into the Uber she ordered after a night at the bar. However, she quickly realized she'd entered the wrong vehicle, but the driver locked the windows and had child-proof locks on the doors. He then proceeded to stab her more than 100 times with a double-bladed knife. Josephson lost so much blood that there was only 1 tablespoon left in her entire body when it was found. 24-year-old Nathaniel Rowland was later sentenced to life behind bars for the horrific murder. Since 2004, at least 18 people have died from rabies after receiving organ transplants from infected donors. Transplanted organs are typically not screened for rabies, which can incubate for more than a year before any symptoms show, at which point it's 100% fatal. 24-year-old Bulgarian influencer Andrea Ivanova drew global attention after reportedly spending more than $49,000 on repeated lip filler procedures in pursuit of extreme cosmetic changes. She's publicly shared complications following treatments, including severe swelling, discomfort, and being unable to fully close her mouth. Doctors warn that excessive filler can stretch tissue, increase infection risk, and permanently alter normal facial function. In 2018, a 34-year-old man in Hunan, China attempted to fake his own death by sending his car into a river as part of an insurance fraud scheme meant to send his family a payout of about $145,000. But fully believing her husband had truly died, his wife later drowned their 2 children before taking her own life. Authorities said she had no knowledge of the plan and had been under severe emotional and financial stress, including heavy medical expenses tied to a child's epilepsy treatment. The man resurfaced days later and turned himself into police, telling investigators the scheme was driven by debt, turning what began as a fraud attempt into a fatal chain of unintended consequences. In 2017, British hairdresser Daryl Rowe was convicted of deliberately infecting 5 men with HIV. He would meet his victims through dating apps before sleeping with them, after which he would send them taunting messages telling them he lied about being HIV negative. Rowe ended up being sentenced to life imprisonment for his evil actions. In 1966, an 18-year-old man entered a beauty school in Arizona before shooting 7 people inside, killing 5 of them, including a toddler. When questioned about his motive, he said he simply did it to get his name out there. Doctor and philanthropist Patch Adams only agreed to the 1999 film about his life because the producers promised to help build his hospital. But none of the profits from the film were ever given to his foundation, and Adams himself said he hated the movie and everything it stood for. In 1955, a pregnant woman was scheduled for a C-section in Morocco, but she fled the hospital after watching another woman die during the procedure. She was in pain for a few days afterwards, but when the pain suddenly disappeared, she simply went on with her life. 46 years later, she was diagnosed with a tumor that turned out to be the calcified baby still inside of her. Ariana Grande reportedly has a longtime stalker named Paige Neiman who tries to impersonate the famous singer. She's been obsessed with Grande since she was 12 years old and has allegedly undergone several plastic surgeries to look like her despite being only 20 years old. When the Titanic sank, the richest passenger on board was business mogul John Jacob Astor IV, who had enough money in his bank account to build 30 Titanics. He ended up giving up his spot in the final lifeboat to instead save the lives of a random woman and her daughter. These were the last photos of Garrett Miller, taken just minutes before a soccer goalpost tipped over and struck him in the head, killing him instantly. In 2013, a family dog named Killian was protecting a baby boy from an abusive babysitter by standing between them and growling at her. This made the boy's parents suspicious of the babysitter, so they hid a recording device under the couch and heard her swearing at the baby while possibly shaking and slapping him. The sitter eventually pleaded guilty to assault and battery of a child and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. As a teenager, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's family was struggling so badly that they were evicted from their apartment in Hawaii. Not long afterwards, Johnson witnessed something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. His mother stepped out of her car on a busy highway and began walking towards oncoming traffic. Luckily, Dwayne sprinted after her and pulled her back just before she was hit. Years later, he revealed that the incident was a suicide attempt brought on by their dire situation, saying he never forgot how powerless he felt in that moment. In 2008, 39-year-old Stefan Miller was helping his cousin, Hollywood animal trainer Randy Miller, film a promo video with their 700-pound grizzly bear named Rocky, the same bear that starred alongside Will Ferrell in Semi-Pro that same year. But in an instant, the trained bear turned deadly. Without warning, Rocky suddenly lunged and bit deep into Stefan's neck, crushing his spine and severing an artery. He bled out within minutes as horrified crew members looked on. The bear, raised in captivity and for years considered to be safe, proved that even the most well-trained predator can revert back to its instincts in a heartbeat. In 2015, actor Steve Rannazzisi, best known for playing Kevin on The League, publicly admitted that he had lied for more than a decade about surviving the 9/11 attacks. He had repeatedly claimed he was working on a high floor at the World Trade Center and narrowly escaped when the planes hit. But after journalists discovered that Merrill Lynch had no offices in the towers and that Rannazzisi was never there, the actor confessed the story was fabricated and that he was actually in Midtown Manhattan. The admission sparked widespread backlash for obvious reasons, with many accusing him of exploiting a national tragedy and the trauma of real survivors, permanently damaging his reputation. Here's a video demonstrating the potency of the venom from a Russell's viper. Russell's vipers are among the most venomous snakes in the world, responsible for tens of thousands of serious bites each year across Southeast Asia. Their venom contains enzymes that aggressively activate the blood's clotting factors, forcing clots to form through the bloodstream. Here's what that looks like in human blood. These abnormal clots can block blood flow to vital organs, increasing the risk of strokes and heart attacks. As clotting factors are rapidly exhausted, the blood loses its ability to clot where it's needed, intentionally leading to internal bleeding, shock, and organ failure. In July of 2025, 43-year-old Clinton Brink and his wife Kristen were hiking with their 2 young daughters, ages 7 and 9, at Devil's Den State Park in Arkansas when they were suddenly attacked on a remote trail by a stranger armed with a knife. Witnesses later described the man as having an unsettling death stare before he suddenly launched the assault without warning or provocation. Clinton immediately fought off the attacker to buy time for his family to escape, while Kristen ran the girls to safety and then returned to help her husband. Both parents were fatally stabbed during the struggle. The children were later found uninjured about a half a mile away, having been protected by their parents' final acts of bravery. A 5-day multi-state manhunt later ensued after investigators discovered blood at the scene that didn't belong to either victim. The suspect, 28-year-old teacher Andrew James McGann, was eventually located and arrested at a barbershop in Springdale, Arkansas, where he was in the middle of getting a haircut to alter his appearance. There are currently hundreds of deceased people in the U.S. whose bodies are frozen in liquid nitrogen, including baseball legend Ted Williams. The hope is that future technology will be able to revive them one day. While this could possibly work, cryogenic freezing has proven to be a terribly risky operation. In one instance, the Cryonics Society of California ran out of money and couldn't keep their customers frozen, so the bodies began to thaw and decompose. Some of the bodies even went missing, and to this day, their families still don't know what happened to them. In January of 2015, a walker passing through Squirrelwood Scout Camp near Doncaster, England, stumbled upon a sight so grimly bizarre that it made national headlines. Wedged headfirst in a rabbit hole was the body of 50-year-old Stephen Winfrey, a local hunter who had gone missing the day before after taking his dog out to catch rabbits. Investigators pieced together that Winfrey likely tried to reach into the burrow to grab his prey when his torso became trapped at an angle so tight he couldn't breathe or pull himself free. He eventually suffocated in the confined space, his legs still sticking out of the earth as if frozen mid-stride. When rescuers found him, his body was so firmly wedged that it took hours to dislodge, and soil had compacted around his face like a coffin of dirt. His loyal dog was found alive tied to a nearby tree but was trembling and dehydrated, having watched helplessly as its owner got stuck and slowly ran out of air. The coroner ruled his horrifying death an accidental asphyxiation. A man was looking for his childhood home on Google Maps when he found both of his dead parents still sitting outside. As the Titanic sank, one female passenger chose to stay on board because she refused to leave her dog. She was found dead in the water, holding her dog in her arms. If sugar gliders are deprived of social interaction, they can become so sad that they can die from loneliness. In 2007, a man from Florida woke up in the middle of the night with a severe headache. When he drove to the hospital, they found a bullet in his head. It turned out that his wife had shot him in the head while he was sleeping. In 2009, spelunker John Jones was caving with some friends and family in the Nutty Putty Cave in Utah. About an hour into the expedition, John decided to find the route known as the Birth Canal, a narrow passage that spelunkers must crawl through carefully if they dare. After finding what he thought was the birth canal, he crawled in head first and started inching his way forward. But John would soon realize that this wasn't the birth canal, since it was way tighter than anything safe to crawl through. By this point, John didn't even have enough room to wiggle out the way he came, so his only option was to push forward. Over the next 27 hours, hundreds of rescuers failed to pull John out of the crevice. At some point, John died from cardiac arrest and his body was never retrieved. The Nutty Putty Cave has since been sealed off. This was the moment a couple of drunk fishermen spotted a floating whale carcass and thought it would be a good idea to climb on top of it. What they didn't realize is that they were sitting on skin that was already soft and tearing apart, meaning they easily could have fallen straight through and into the whale's guts. Once inside, the collapsing flesh and toxic gases could trap them, suffocate them, or crush them before anyone could help. Additionally, a dead whale is basically a massive rotting pressure tank. As the body decomposes, bacteria inside release huge amounts of methane and other gases that stretch the skin like a balloon. Even a small shift in weight or a tiny puncture can make the entire thing rupture. And this isn't just disturbing or gross, but can even be deadly. In 2013, a dead sperm whale in the Faroe Islands exploded after someone cut into it, killing a man who was standing nearby. In Taiwan in 2004, a whale carcass detonated while being transported through a city, injuring dozens and covering streets in blood and organs. And in Oregon in 1970, officials tried to blow up a beached whale with dynamite, launching massive chunks of blubber hundreds of feet, destroying several cars and nearly killing spectators. At age 25, a woman named Blanche Monnier had her heart set on marrying a lawyer that her mother wasn't too fond of. When she disappeared one day, most assumed that she had simply run off with him. But 25 years later, someone sent local authorities an anonymous letter saying her mother was holding her hostage. When they arrived at the home, they found Blanche bound and starving in the attic. Dying is forbidden in the town of Longyearbyen, Norway, or at least, you won't be buried there. The town's only cemetery closed over 70 years ago because it's so cold that the bodies buried there previously never decomposed. The problem is that some corpses still carry traces of the Spanish flu virus that killed up to 50 million people worldwide around 100 years ago. This was one of the last known photos taken of rapper XXXTentacion, moments before he was fatally shot during a robbery outside a Florida motorcycle dealership in June of 2018. Investigators determined it was not a targeted hit job, but a robbery gone wrong after suspects spotted his luxury vehicle and expensive Louis Vuitton bag. Released surveillance footage showed two gunmen approaching his car, demanding the bag and opening fire when he resisted. The 20-year-old artist, born Jose Onfroy, was shot multiple times at close range and died shortly after at a nearby hospital. In 2023, 3 men were convicted of his first-degree murder and armed robbery. Beatrice Flamini spent 500 days completely alone inside a cave nearly 230 feet underground, cut off from sunlight, clocks, and all human contact as part of an experiment on extreme isolation. She entered the cave in November of 2021 and did not emerge until April of 2023, with no communication with the outside world during that time. Scientists monitoring her remotely had found that her circadian rhythm had completely collapsed, with severe sleep disruption, memory lapses, and slowed cognition developing over time. Flamini later described moments of mental detachment and sensory distortion, and when she finally resurfaced, she genuinely believed she'd only been underground for about 160 days, illustrating how prolonged isolation can fundamentally fracture the brain's sense of time and reality. Joey Gatos Jr., the child actor who played Zach Mooneyham in School of Rock, was arrested in Florida in 2019 after allegedly stealing multiple guitars and amplifiers from local music stores. Authorities said he'd enter shops, test out pricey instruments like a professional, then simply walk out the door with them before pawning them off for quick cash. The spree reportedly lasted several weeks before he was caught, and police suggested the thefts were connected to struggles with substance abuse. Once celebrated for his guitar skills on screen, Gatos' real-life downfall was a far cry from the rock star dream that made him famous. In 1926, jazz legend Fats Waller was leaving a Chicago nightclub when 4 armed men suddenly grabbed him, threw him into a car, and drove off. Initially terrified, Waller soon realized he wasn't being robbed. He was being delivered as a surprise birthday gift to none other than mob boss Al Capone. Forced to play piano at Capone's private party, Waller ended up performing for 3 straight days, while dozens of gangsters cheered, drank, and shoved cash into his pockets. When it was finally all over, Waller stumbled out of the mansion completely drunk, covered in sweat, and stuffed with thousands of dollars in tips. Despite the bizarre ordeal, Waller reportedly laughed it off afterwards, saying it was the best paying gig he ever had by far. In 1960, 12-year-old Howard Doley was given an unnecessary lobotomy because his stepmother wasn't able to handle a normal preteen boy. She took him to several doctors who said Howard was perfectly healthy and blamed his questionable behavior on her bad parenting. That was until Dr. Walter Freeman, the man who popularized the lobotomy, diagnosed him with schizophrenia and offered to scramble his brain. It took Howard decades to recover from the barbaric procedure, spending years of his life in institutions, prisons, as a homeless person, and an alcoholic. Howard eventually earned a college degree and wrote several memoirs about his lobotomy. In 2009, the body of a man with graying hair was found washed up on a beach in Sligo, Ireland. He'd been checked into a nearby hotel under the name Peter Bergman, and his movements were captured on security cameras throughout the town, but aside from this, very little is known about the man. He was found with most of his clothes left behind on the shore, with no wallet, money, or form of ID. It's not even clear how he died, since there was no evidence of drowning or foul play, but the post-mortem showed that he had advanced stages of prostate cancer and bone tumors, and was likely in significant pain before he died. One thing that's for certain is that the man traveled extensively to erase all evidence of his existence, as he still remains unidentified to this day. As part of a fundraising publicity stunt in 1986, United Way released 1.5 million balloons in Cleveland, Ohio. But the event resulted in utter disaster since the balloons clogged various waterways and even shut down an airport. They also interrupted a Coast Guard search for 2 missing boaters who were later found to have drowned. As a sign of mourning, ancient Egyptians would often shave their eyebrows when their cats died. David Gaines earned 5 bachelor degrees at the same time at the University of Connecticut, but he sadly drowned and died just a few months after graduating because he never learned how to swim. If you ever have a kidney stone, just take a ride on Thunder Mountain in Disney World. After hearing rumors, a Michigan urologist took kidney models filled with stones on the ride. He found that the stones were passed up to 70% of the time depending on where he sat. This was the moment when a typical news broadcast turned into an outright nightmare for CBS reporter Lara Logan. On the night of February 11, 2011, as Egypt erupted in celebration over the resignation of their president, Lara Logan was in Cairo documenting the historic moment with her CBS crew for more than an hour, until their camera battery suddenly died and they stopped to regroup. Her local translator then heard the crowd say things like, "Let's take her pants off," and a night of celebration quickly turned into pure terror for the journalist. Suddenly separated from her bodyguards and translators, Logan was swallowed by a crowd of 200 to 300 men who suddenly turned on her in a violent sexual assault. Her clothes were torn, she was dragged, beaten, and by her account, raped with their hands while others filmed on cell phones. She struggled to breathe as her ribcage was compressed and her limbs went numb, convinced she was gonna die. After about 30 minutes, a group of Egyptian women and 24 soldiers forced their way into the mob and carried her away. Logan was hospitalized, flown home the next day, and later went public to break the silence about mass sexual assaults in protest crowds and the risks constantly faced by women in volatile environments of men. If you were to swim near a pod of narwhals and happen to hear one whistle, it might be the last thing that you ever heard. The sounds that narwhals make are so loud that they're said to be deafening to humans. Visiting the island of Socotra in Yemen can seem like you're on another planet. More than 30% of the plant life on the island isn't found anywhere else on Earth. Villagers along the Niger River in Zimbabwe were losing cows and people at such an alarming rate that they had to call in the National Army. The culprit? A 22-foot, 2,500-pound monster crocodile. Here's a clip of a blonde raccoon and her babies on an unlikely adventure. Caused by a rare genetic mutation found in less than 1 in 10,000, her pale fur makes her easy prey in the wild, making it extremely rare to find a blonde raccoon that reached adulthood. 6 years ago, a farm donkey named Diesel went missing in Wyoming. He was just recently found living amongst a herd of elk, and now he's one of them. Experts call it highly unusual for a donkey to form such a deep bond with a completely different species, relying on them for both companionship and survival. Since he appears safe and content, officials decided to let him stay with his adopted elk family. Photographer Nicholas Escarot captured incredible footage of red sprites, massive bursts of electricity that flicker high above thunderstorm clouds. They last less than 1/10 of a second, growing crimson in the upper atmosphere and appearing as a brief alien invasion. In 1930, engineers pulled off one of the strangest construction feats in U.S. history, rotating an entire 22 million pound building while people were still working inside. The Indiana Bell Telephone Building in Indianapolis was turned 90 degrees over a month, inching along at just 15 inches per hour. Nearly 600 employees continued answering phones as the 8-story structure quietly pivoted on hydraulic jacks. Gas, water, and electricity all stayed connected, and not a single day of service was lost. In 1978, Charlie Chaplin's body was stolen and held for ransom, but his widow refused to pay ransom demands of 400,000 euros because she said Charlie would have thought it to be ridiculous. His body was found in a cornfield 11 weeks later, and the 2 suspects were apprehended. A woman in Florida once spent 6 straight years sitting on a couch. She died during a surgery that attempted to remove her skin that was grafted into the fabric. Frank Hayes was a jockey who suffered a fatal heart attack and died in the middle of a horse race in 1923. His body, however, remained on the saddle throughout the race, as his horse Sweet Kiss crossed the finish line ahead of the rest, thus winning the race. This was the first time Hayes had ever won a race, and the last. The first firefighter to die on 9/11 was a 37-year-old man named Daniel Sir. He was killed when a woman jumped from one of the towers and landed on top of him. Founder of CNN, Ted Turner, has a video scheduled to be broadcasted if the end of the world is ever upon us. There's a horrific belief in South Africa that sex with a virgin will cure you of HIV. Adult men have been known to rape children as young as 9 years old in hopes of a cure. It's called the virgin cleansing myth. This is why you should never let anyone kiss your baby, or just don't kiss someone else's baby. A 2-year-old boy from England recently lost vision in his left eye after someone with an active cold sore kissed him, transferring the herpes simplex virus directly into his eye. The infection caused a blister to form on his cornea that quickly turned into a 4mm wide open wound, leading to repeated infections and permanent nerve damage. Doctors said the virus destroyed the feeling in that eye, and the brain eventually stopped sending signals to it, leaving him completely blind on that side. His parents tested negative for herpes, so doctors believe an acquaintance unknowingly passed the virus through a kiss. Despite weeks of treatment, the damage was irreversible, and doctors were later forced to sew his eyelid shut to protect what remained of that eye. In June of 2004, an 8-year-old girl slipped into the active pool at the Fort Worth Water Gardens, a fountain system powered by strong underground pumps that created a hidden undertow. When her father and 2 brothers jumped in to save her, they were immediately dragged under by the suction and drowned. A 4th bystander who tried to help was also pulled in and killed. None of them realized the pool contained currents strong enough to trap adults underwater, and by the time the pumps were shut off, all 4 rescuers were already dead. The harpy eagle is considered to be the largest and most powerful bird in the rainforest. Its rear talons can grow up to 4 inches long, about the same size as a grizzly bear's claws. It's certainly no mistake that this majestic bird is literally named after a mythological monster. This is what a baby swordfish looks like on someone's fingertip. This little guy will grow to be over 1,000 pounds one day. Calathris archeri, aka the devil's fingers, might look like a creature with tentacles upon first glance, but it's actually a fungus. It is also known as the octopus stinkhorn because it smells of rotting flesh. In its early stages, it looks like an alien emerging out of a pod, and many people have mistakenly reported it as such. During a match in Germany in 1993, star tennis player Monica Seles was stabbed in the back with a 9-inch kitchen knife by Gunter Parch, an obsessed fan of her rival Steffi Graf. Parch was infuriated that Celis had overtaken Graf as the #1 player in the world, and admitted that he wanted to injure Celis so severely that she couldn't play tennis for a long time. Following the attack, Celis took a 2-year hiatus from pro tennis and never fully regained her prior dominance. The attacker received a suspended sentence with probation and psychological treatment, a verdict that sparked widespread outrage across the sports world. In 2019, a Frenchman accidentally killed his friend during a fight and in a panic stuffed his body under his mattress. To avoid suspicion, he slept on it for nearly 2 years while regularly spraying air fresheners and bug repellent to mask the stench. He was eventually caught when the odor became overwhelming for his neighbors. In 1984, California man David Burke was fired from his airline job for a petty theft. So he smuggled a loaded gun onto the flight, shot the pilots mid-air, and deliberately crashed the plane into the ground, killing all 43 passengers on board. Investigators later found a note in his pocket addressed to his former boss stating, "I asked for some leniency for my family, remember? Well, I got none, and you'll get none."